Well, we have David Liggett with us here today, and we're going to be talking about something very new to me, and this is going to be kind of interesting because it's kind of merging two of my careers here. But David is the CEO of Data Center Hawk, and you can find more information about his company at datacenterhawk.com. But they also have a podcast, so take a look at that as well as they talk to CXO level experts and professionals around data center and where that type of industry is growing. But you're probably starting to wonder, why am I talking to somebody regarding data centers? Well, David has kind of a unique investment strategy when it comes to data centers, because this is a commercial real estate investment play that I didn't realize was even a niche. So this is going to be kind of a really interesting conversation. So really appreciate your time, David. Thanks for being here.
You bet. And Jack, thank you for hosting, and excited to get to share our thoughts on the data center industry and how it's growing. And just really excited to be here.
So let's start things off. Like, how did you get into this, especially when it comes to the real estate investing part?
Yeah, you bet. I got into the data center industry by accident. So back in 2007, I joined a commercial real estate company called CBRE. So some people might have heard of that company, but if you haven't, it's basically a global Fortune. I think now it's a Fortune 200 real estate company that serves clients all around the world. And so I live in Dallas, Texas. So I got on into the office here in Dallas and started working really in the office market. So helping companies find office space. And very quickly, I joined a team that their focus was on helping companies with their data center infrastructure needs. So if you think about a company and their website and all of the IT and the technology that goes along with their with those operations, it requires digital infrastructure, and that infrastructure is found in what's called the data center. So that's typically for listeners that might not know, it's a building that houses the servers that are typically in racks and cabinets for companies' IT systems. So we did all the work around helping companies think about where they should put their digital infrastructure. Some of the companies wanted to do it in their own building so they could control it. Some of them wanted it to actually lease that infrastructure. And then some of them wanted to put it in the cloud, which is a fancy word for basically just, putting it into the likes of buildings that are owned by Amazon or Microsoft or Google or someone like that. So I spent about 8 years with CBRE helping companies think about that strategy from a commercial real estate perspective. And so that's how I got into the space. And that was, like I said, back in 2007. It is fortunately a very young industry. And so it's still, I feel like we're still seeing things in the space that we've never seen before. And it's, now it's 2021.
Sure. So, when I was looking at some of the numbers that was sent over to me regarding this, you talked about the typical commercial real estate value is $30 to $50 a square foot when it comes to as an investment. But this data center space can be much higher. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you came about those type of numbers?
Yeah, that's a great thing to start with. So basically, if you're in the commercial real estate industry and you think about the industrial sector or the office sector, if you think industrial, retail, office, typically your values are going up based on the amount of money spent and capital needed to produce those types of asset classes. When you get to the data center space, a lot of the money is spent around the equipment that it takes to actually run these data centers facilities. These servers that are actually put in these cabinets that are stored in these buildings produce a lot of heat. And so in order to have them work correctly, the facilities need to be able to cool those facilities. So you need just massive electrical and mechanical systems needed to run these facilities. There is typically 10 times more power coming into a data center facility than there would be an office facility, sometimes even larger than that. And so when you bring all of that infrastructure into one building, it takes the capital needed to produce a building like that up very high. And so while the data center industry is a smaller niche, it's definitely a more capital intensive niche. And so we have seen it be an industry where investors today are looking at maybe more than they ever have before, given the growth of the space in general. And then certainly what happened with the pandemic, we've seen that data center industry and different markets actually grow even more.
Sure. That was going to actually leads me to that next question. I mean, I'm sure, are you finding more and more space available, because of the pandemic? Businesses are obviously closing and a few other things. There's just more commercial property available right now.
Yeah, I'd say that we've seen the opposite as it relates to the data center space. So what actually we saw in 2020 in the US was one of the largest growth periods in the data center industry ever, because things like working from home and companies, the ones I mentioned before, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts, their footprint was growing because so many companies were utilizing their the business offerings, or even like the B2C offerings that are out there. And so when that took place, we saw a lot of those companies expand. And because of that, it actually took a lot of the data center, either power and space that was on the market or sites that were going to be built or could be built in the future, off the market, because those companies expanded. So, depending on what market you're in, we see the vacancy rates kind of rise and fall like you would in the normal office market or industrial markets. But I would say that, right now there is, typically not enough power and space on the market to meet the data center demand that we have seen. So we have seen a lot of data center operators, some publicly traded REITs. There's about 10 of them in the data center space, or privately owned operators that actually have a lot of capital that are actually buying sites in areas like Northern Virginia, Chicago, Dallas, Phoenix, Silicon Valley, Atlanta. And they're buying sites so that when the demand comes here in a year, 2 years, 3 years, they're in a position to capture it.
Sure. So are you pretty much building these facilities, or are you retrofitting something else?
So our business, so if you go to datacenterhawk.com, our business is actually, I would say the opposite. What we do is we collect all of the data in the market, we put it on our website, and then our business model is a subscription-based model, so that people that need information about the space can actually subscribe to our site, get it, and then go invest into the space. Then go spend, the data center owners that we work with that use our site. I mean, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in markets all across the world, and so they'll use our data to help make the best decision possible. So one of the interesting things about the data center space is, up until we started our company, there was not an industry standard of like market data in the space. And that was back in 2014. So you had companies that were making these massive investments without great data or an unbiased data source that was helping provide information that would help shape the framework around those decisions. So that's why we started our business. So we actually provide data to the people that are building the market, that are buying the land in different markets. And we track all that information and put it into formats and subscribable products that make it easy for them to make the best decisions possible.
So what type of data would somebody need to make this type of investment? What are you curating that would be out of the norm compared to traditional commercial real estate?
Yeah, some of it is similar, which is, hey, how big is the market? How much of the market is vacant? How much is under construction? How much is planned? That's one thing. But the main difference is, in our space, we measure markets by power. So we're not looking at square footage. We're looking at how many megawatts of power is built in the market, and then how much of that power is available. Because when a company goes to lease infrastructure from a data center owner, they're actually leasing the ability to utilize that power in the facility. And so that's what the leases are actually structured on, is that power amount, and not how much square footage they take. That makes sense. So sometimes the traditional real estate investor might have a hard time going like, wait a minute, this isn't a per square foot game. It's a per megawatt game. And that's what we have seen it. Now, all of this, I would say, is existing in buildings, so there certainly is a square footage amount around it. But the metric that makes everything move in our space is power. how much power is there, how much power is available. And so the people that investors that utilize our data want to understand how big is the Dallas market versus the Chicago market or the Phoenix market. And so here's an interesting fact about the data center industry, but the biggest data center market in the world, and you probably know this because of your day job, but is in Northern Virginia. It's right outside of Washington, D.C. in a little area called Ashburn, Loudoun County. That is where the world's largest density of data centers are. The biggest buyers, the biggest developments, that's where they sit. And it really started 20 plus years ago and has been growing ever since. But we track the data that helps people understand, hey, should I be in this market or that market? Should I spend $200 million growing here or there? Or if I'm going to invest in a real estate asset in Chicago, how big is it compared to its competition? Those are the type of things that our data helps people solve.
Outside of the megawatts, then what other factors would be a good decider to?
Yeah, one of the things we look at as well is power costs. So it's very important that if you are a larger data center user or some of the companies that I mentioned before, because their size of requirement is so large, they will have a large power bill, as you can imagine. And typically they want to be in areas where power is as less expensive as possible. And so, they will work to be in those certain areas. Now I will say that sometimes the business requirement pushes them to be in markets where the power cost might be higher, but there is a strategic reason that they would want to do this. So just understanding, hey, what's the difference in power costs between some of those markets that we mentioned before? Silicon Valley, Chicago, Phoenix, Dallas, Atlanta. That's an important thing to figure out. Also, pricing. The pricing in the data center industry is a little different. As I mentioned, you don't pay your leases on a per square foot basis. You pay them on a per kW per month basis. So you're just basically renting the infrastructure. And so understanding how that pricing works is really important because that's what's going to drive the leasing and the development that takes place all across the U.S. and all across the world.
So we can go into the weeds on this quite a bit. So I'm going to point everybody to your website again, datacenterhawk.com, for a lot of some of the finer details regarding this. But let's change the conversation just a little bit regarding like the average Joe, then somebody who's looking to get into real estate investing and commercial real estate investing. How does your products, or how can you help them get involved in this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first thing I would say is we actually put together an 8 course blog and video series called, I think it's called what? Data Center Fundamentals. That's what it's called. So if you go on YouTube and you type in Data Center Hawk, one word, you will come up to our basically YouTube page. And literally we answer questions like, what is a data center? What is connectivity? What is the cloud? What is, why is location important related to data centers? So you literally, the bad thing is you got to look at me for about 20 minutes each time. But the good thing is there's actually some really good information on these videos and blogs that we do. We also on our website, you can go to our blog and we're putting out consistent information on the market. So that's one way I would say is a really good way to, and that's free. Anyone can access it. Go get it. We have a product called Hawk Insight, which is every quarter we produce almost 40 market overviews in the US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. And the goal with those market overviews is to answer the questions that I just meant, or the things that we just talked about. How's the market growing? What are the trends? Who is doing what? What are the developments that are taking place? And our team is constantly in the market. We're constantly talking to data center owners, investors, consultants, users about how they're growing. And then we aggregate all that data and put it in one place. So that's probably the best place. If you're really wanting to go into the next level, that's the spot to go. But if at a high level, if you just want to understand the space and the opportunity, those blogs and those videos are great ways to do it.
So you talked about the opportunity there, and we touched on it briefly, but when we were doing a comparison to the traditional commercial real estate investing, what would typically be the per square foot return on a data center real estate investment?
Well, typically, like we've seen, just as it's called, like rate of returns, when we've seen those percentages, it's funny, when I started in like 2007, as I mentioned, if the real estate investments were probably receiving like, mid to high teen returns, so if you think about compared to, your 6 to 8% returns on maybe more traditional real estate asset classes, that back then was amazing. We have seen those returns get compressed over the last 10 years for a number of reasons. One, right, it's a much more competitive space. Two, the building is more efficient today than it was. And some of that's been stripped out. So, we'll see returns anywhere from like the, 8 to 12% range based on, depending on where the project is. And, that typically is like what we will see on investments that are being made in the space. And I would say, like, as the market changes, there'll probably be additional compression. But one thing about the data center space that's really interesting is literally since I got in it, since 2007, there's never really been a dip, meaning we've never had, it's grown. And at times it's steadied off a little bit. But if you just think about it, since 2007, what company has depended less on technology than before? Who as a consumer is doing less with technology today than they were doing, with 10 years ago? And the answer is not many people. It's hard to find, when I think about the way personally I use technology, the way our company depends on technology, the way my family, uses technology, it's just, that's growing. And so as that grows exponentially, it's really fueling this, not only the cloud growth that's out there today, and as those offerings make it easier for people to, get servers online faster and all that stuff, but also just the personal usage of devices. So when you put all that together, it's really what's driving the need for this space and the continual investment by people in the commercial real estate market that are really trying to understand, hey, how can we get into a different asset class that might not be as visible, but is certainly as profitable? And the data center industry is that, in my perspective.
Well, with the pandemic, did you actually see an increase during this time, this past year and a half or 2 years?
Yeah, we really did. When, if you think back to March of 2020, I think we all were a bit surprised and scratching our heads at what is the future going to look like. And even as, being in the data center space, we were trying to understand, that there were heavy implications around these people not being able to come in and work in these buildings, because these buildings are what are powering things like hospital records and financial, bank access to bank accounts and all the things we use every day. So, one thing I think is really important that the data center industry showed was the resilience to learn how to operate facilities in the midst of this changing environment. The data center industry does not like change, meaning it's a very secure environment, from all the way from the security like walls all the way into where the server is. You want a known environment. You want to know what the temperature is. You want to know what's on the hardware. You want to know who's in there. And so the pandemic really challenged that. And so for the data center industry, not only to stay online the way it did, but also grow and position companies that found that their businesses were growing. Amazon is probably the best example of people went from utilizing Amazon in one way to utilizing it maybe in a different way, or increasing, the online purchasing and things like that. If you just think about how we now use people in grocery stores to bring our groceries to us, all of that is happening on servers and online. And that boosted the need for digital infrastructure, which is going into, a data center physical building, whether that's what we call co-location or cloud. And so because of that, and people working from home remotely, that boosted network needs for network. When all that happened, it really increased what was taking place in the data center industry, not just here in the US, but in Europe and Asia. And so and it still is, it's a very, I would say, frenetic time for data center growth across the world.
Well, I've just run into quite a few companies that, they were forced into the situation where their employees are working from home. It was something that they never really grappled with before. And then after they've made that transition, now they're questioning, why do we still even need an office space? So, they're just So there's going to be quite a bit of commercial property that I would expect that would go vacant and could maybe be repurposed.
I mean, I think there's a couple things in that. Number one, if you're investing in the office market, you know, it's a different day today than it was certainly 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago. You know, I think it's stronger today than it has been because some companies have come back to the office and believe that they will eventually. You know, there certainly are some changes that will be made, but you know, most organizations believe that face-to-face in some way is a good thing. So, but from a data center perspective, the one thing I'd say about that is, you know, not every vacant building or vacant land site is a good data center site because data centers are, you know, really anchored by large amounts of power and large amounts of connectivity, fiber and network and those things needed. So when you find a site or a building smack dab in the middle of that, that's a highly valuable building because of what you can do with that. If you have to bring that to it, there's capital involved with that. So if you are out there looking at vacant office buildings that have come back because of the pandemic, the two most important things would be how much power is close by and how much connectivity is there. And if the answer is a lot in both, it's probably an interesting opportunity. If not, then, you know, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. This just, like I said, we could just keep going down the rabbit hole on some of this stuff. The questions could be possibly endless. So just to clarify then exactly what your company does is provides a subscription service for those individuals who are looking to invest in this type of niche and to provide them that information to make that informed decision.
You bet. We found that this was an industry that would continue to grow, was highly capital intensive. And when those two things are put together, you know, information to help people build a framework, whether that's around investing or owning or helping companies figure out what their decision needs to be. We found that information was really valuable, and we wanted to be the best and we wanted to try to be the best at getting that data and putting it into formats for our customers to use. So that's what we've done over the last 7 years. We have worked our tails off to provide a platform that allows people to do that. So as you mentioned, datacenterhawk.com, people can go. There's a trial available that you can get on there and take a look around. There's even a search tool that I would compare to like a Zillow for data centers, where you can actually see a map, search a physical market, see where the data centers are, pull up a profile. All of that information is on our website. And then the design is to help people make the best decision possible.
So based on what you know then regarding, you're probably sourcing quite a few different REITs and a few other organizations that provide this type of investment. Do you typically find that they'd have to be sophisticated investors, or can anybody get involved?
I would say that before I would get involved, I would educate yourself, you know, and I think once you spend time learning about the space, you would figure out if it's something you want to be involved in. It's different than the office market, industrial market, retail market. I mean, there's different dynamics. It's because it's highly capital intensive. Typically the people that are getting involved, you know, are on the are on like the higher side of the investment scale where they're investing more capital. I mean, certainly you can invest into these companies that are publicly traded. That's one side of it. But if you're looking to invest in the real estate asset side of things, you know, you got to have, in my opinion, your head screwed on straight and really understand what those dynamics are. And so we found that to be a smaller group, but it's one that I'm telling you, people are winning in this space. I mean, it is a fascinating area to invest in, and it's one that we don't see going away anytime soon. And we have the data to show that, you know, the last 7 to 10 years of this market, we've only seen it grow. So while we know there will be things that come up here and there, we're also pretty confident in the digital infrastructure growth, and that directly is found in the data center industry.
Sure. Well, you know, we only have the last 5 minutes here, but before I let you go, I want to make sure that everybody has your contact information. Again, datacenterhawk.com. Take advantage of that free trial and take a look at it. See if this is something that you'd be interested in. Especially check out the Data Center Fundamentals on their YouTube channel. I mean, there's got to be a lot of great information there. Just scrolling through your website, I think this could be a rabbit hole for anybody. Just there's so much information out here that it's great to see.
Yeah, we're excited to, help continue to provide information in the space. So like you said, I mean, the best way to do that is go to our site. We are producing like weekly podcasts and discussions with industry leaders talking about trends. So as you get deeper into that, there's additional data that you can, or information that you can watch and consume that can help build that framework. But I would just say this as we close, I would just say, the people that are in this space, that are invested in this space, are winning. And I don't just mean that by like the financial opportunities that are in the market. I mean that too by the career opportunities and the way this market is changing. This is a dynamic industry. It's global. And there's really no end in sight to how big it can get because of the way we as humans are depending on digital infrastructure. So it's a fascinating market to be in. We're thankful that we're here and we're really excited about the future.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. But before I let you go, I always end with one question, but I have a feeling you've already answered that with that last statement. I know we covered a lot of ground today, but is there a question you wished I would have asked you here today?
I think the question that you probably should have asked me is, how will the Dallas Cowboys fare in the 2021-22 season? And I would probably be more positive.
Because of the location I'm at, I would never ask that question.
I figured. I know. No, I'm a big sports fan. But no, I feel like we had a great discussion. I think your background, obviously, and what you do during the day is certainly positioned you well for this discussion. But no, thanks for the time. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it was great chatting with you. I hope you can come back again sometime. I would love to chat a little bit more in detail and go down the avenue and go into a little bit more detail on a couple things. This is these type of, I keep calling it a niche, but I mean, frankly, that's what it is. There's all of these very profitable niches that if somebody focuses on it, the returns, you and I started our conversation off talking about focus. If you focus on certain things, it's amazing the results. And this is something in particular that sounds like it could be a good fit for a lot of people.
Yeah, you're right. It's just a lot of it is just kind of understanding it, building that, informational framework, and then taking the next steps. And, like I said, the people that get in and do that, I have found that they've been really successful.
So, well, thank you again. This has been a great conversation, and I hope you come back sometime.
You bet. Thanks, Jack.